Tell me a little bit about WASP.
The WASP grew out of an assignment I got for Red Book magazine to investigate a murder of a social worker in East Harlem. And I went around talking to a lot of people there, and then it occurred to me to do a novel where a white lawyer is friendly with a young black guy who's turned into a kind of street preacher who runs a storefront neighborhood kind of agency. And this guy is accused of murder, and the white lawyer is to defend him in the murder. And it's one of those books where the black intelligentsia in this country didn't believe a white man had written it. And the one guy, it's a very interesting story, the guy who wrote No Place to Be Somebody, which got the Pulitzer Prize.
What's his name?
I can't think of his name right now. But the guy who played the lead in his play was reading the book in Mississippi, working on the docks there. And he said he was carrying sugar or some damn thing on one shoulder, reading the book in the other hand, and he is saying, no white man ever wrote this book. He couldn't have known what is in this book, what the black person knows. But the book was assigned, I have to tell you this.
Go ahead.
The book was assigned to some creep on the New York Times called Claude Brown, who was literally hired as an assassin to attack the book. And this information was given to me by the lawyer for the National Association for Colored Persons. He said that he got word that Claude Brown was to kill the book. And the New York Times printed his review without questioning his judgment. Then when I approached the editors of the New York Times and said, this is all crap, this is an assassination, they said, well, we'll give you any amount of space to answer him. But that was bullshit, because in a book review, your reply means nothing. It's just the ego of the author trying to get back at the critic. It's the original review that counts. And the New York Times actually murdered that book, just as though they put a gun to my head.
Tell me a little bit about.
This book was picked, I can't even talk about this book.
Then pick another book.
This book scared the hell out of everybody.
That's a good opening.
This is one of the first novels in literature to deal seriously with the question of incest.
And what year was that?
And this was in 1974, I think. I can't even remember.
I think it's 67.
No, this is later. I can't remember the
Well,
year.
put it up.
1977.
Yeah.
But what I did was, generally in incest, the father attacks a little girl in bed and has incest with her, and that becomes a big TV scandalous story. In here, I have the mother who seduces her son, and that scared the hell out of everyone, because they didn't want to believe that was possible. But what I was really trying to do in this book is to describe the fact that incest is one of the deepest psychological problems that we know about. And it's the fear of letting go between parents and children that has often a very destructive impact on the children. And the mother in this book recognizes that, and she wants to free her son from all the bullshit that most people are party to. And the book deals with a very interesting concept which very few people talk about, the fact of childhood amnesia, that children, before they go to school, are so bright and smart and alive and alert and find everything inventive and exciting. But when they go to school, the teachers hammer it all out of them, and the teachers teach them to conform to what society expects of them. So the children begin to lose their innocence, their naivete, their excitement, their imagination, and they follow the rules. You have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this. But the children always remember, you know, there was a time when they had this innocence and this freedom, and that's what Landfall is about. But there wasn't a single literary critic in America that had the intelligence to sit down and read the damn thing and say, you know, this is a novel of ideas, this is a novel where people are involved. A critic for the New York Times, a famous woman writer, reviewed the book and said it was a great book, but she said, I don't understand it. The New York Times picked it as one of the 10 best novels of the year. The book actually sold less than 1,000 copies. I could have sold more copies going around the street, passing it out to people.
All right.
So Landfall, this is interesting,
Go ahead.
Landfall vanished as a book. Maybe discovered someday, I don't know.
Now, in 1980, I see you wrote a book called The Best Days, dedicated to my brothers Erwin, Jacob, Joseph, my sister Yetta. Tell me a little bit about The Best Days.
The Best Days is partly autobiographical. It's one of the few books in American fiction that deals with the period right after the end of World War II, when the GIs came home and they're living on the GI Bill of Rights, and artists were being supported under the GI Bill, and they're gathered in Greenwich Village. A lot of very intense, exciting men and women who were interested in writing and in painting. And we all knew one another. It was like one big family in a village. On the other side of the coin were the older generation, like Mark Rothko and Jackson Pollock, and this other guy that gets hundreds of thousands of dollars for his paintings. I'll think of his name in a second. But there was a life there. It was exciting. It's now known as one of the golden periods in New York life, really one of the most romantic periods, because there was a sense of openness and freedom and communication. So I describe a painter from Cleveland, Ohio. I say, if Jackson Pollock came from Wyoming, why couldn't you have a famous painter from Cleveland, Ohio? And this guy becomes one of the great painters of his generation.
Tell me about some of the people you've known, famous people. You've had acquaintances or you met. Sit down.
Famous, cancer point.
Oh.
Famous. Who do I know that's famous? I knew George Orwell. He was famous. I met him in London during the war.
Any others?
And he took me to dinner, and I stayed at his house, and he gave me an egg and some jelly on toast during the war, which was almost unobtainable in London at that time. I met Augustus John, who's a very great English painter. Ben Nicholson and Barbara Hepworth were great painters in London, I knew.
You working for the Senator at one time?
I was very friendly with Clement Greenberg, who after the war became the single greatest art critic in the world, and who directed the movement of American art for a number of years. He was like the king. He said, this is good and this is bad, and people said, this is good and this is bad. I knew and corresponded with Samuel Beckett, who got the Pulitzer Prize, not the Pulitzer, the Nobel Prize. And we used to write to each other, and he'd tell me how sick he was, and he can't write anymore, and he's going away. And he, at a dinner party, this is very interesting, at a dinner party in Paris that was attended by my friend Marty Siegel, who was the head of the Lincoln Center and the whole business. There were a lot of fancy people there, and Marty said that some American woman was uptight and saying, there are no American books, nobody's writing American fiction anymore. And Samuel Beckett said, please, lady. He said, Julius Horwitz and the Inhabitants wrote the best American novel I've ever read. And if you want to read a great American novel, read that. And she was stunned.
I